Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Welcome to an entirely new series on the Architect of Resilience podcast. I say series, I think it's probably going to end up being a 6-part series, but who knows how long it will go. I'll be doing this series with the primary individual, Alex Miller. So Alex was head of coaching development at Kabuki Strength, was so for a number of years. So he was the man behind the scenes that was doing the research, developing the methodologies, and training and educating all of the coaches and developing a lot of the curriculum that was being done in the seminars that we were doing. And yeah, when I say next generation training principles, that is really what we're going to be talking about here, doing a much deeper dive than how people think about training, and I think where the future of training is going. You may be asking yourself, well, Chris, I thought KMS was you. Well, yes, the fundamental principles that we started with, those priorities and principles is something that it was an output of me learning from a lot of industry leaders, but Alex is the one that has really taken this to the next level. That's been his sole job over these years, has been diving into these that I haven't had the depth to and taking those principles to a whole nother level. And so I'm really excited to share with you his thought process and approach on this. So welcome to the show. My very long intro, Alex.
Hey man, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good this morning. Yourself?
Good.
Where you at right now today?
Right now I'm in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So it's nice, it's hot. It's like 94, 95 today, and 3-hour thunderstorms. So yeah, wonderful, living a dream.
3 hours thunderstorms, beautiful. Actually, it's late September, right? And I think we're going to be in the 90s or even mid 90s up here in Oregon this week. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know about nice. I'm not one for that temperature range.
Nah.
I like the 70s.
It's okay.
Even
as long as
if
you're
it's training, the
building
60s
AC.
are great, Yeah.
Yeah, for real. Cool.
So let's start talking. I think a great intro is diving into adaptive modulators. So, within this, it's really thinking about the stress index. And with traditional training, we've got, an overlaid phase where we're building a level of accumulation of fatigue. And within that, if we have rest, we're going to have some overreaching phases or see what our peak potential is. But during the course of that, you really don't know what your level of fitness is, like your potential for chronic overuse injuries, things of that nature. They're acute. They may be, precipitated during the course of this, but it's a bit of an unknown. So really understanding the stimulus recovery adaptation curve when it relates to the training, I think your principles have us looking at more of a cellular level. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're using information or predictions about what's happening at a cellular level to inform gross decisions at a more macro level. So when we think about adaptive modulators, it's just ways we can introduce different stimuli. Okay, and when we talk about stress index, we're looking at a way to get a handle on what the internal loading is going to be on the body, rather than traditional methods where we say, okay, well, I'm going to do X amount of volume in X amount of time, and that's going to just be how I'm going to judge it. Whereas we know there's a big difference between doing 10,000 pounds of volume in sets of 10 and 10,000 pounds of volume in singles. So one is going to have a much bigger effect on different aspects of the body. Right? So we need to find a way to make a prediction, because it's not exact, right? But it's a prediction of stress not based upon loading in a normal sense. we're trying to look at what's happening inside the body. So that's kind of where this idea of stress index is coming from. Now, to give credit where it's due, this is from Robert Frederick, who then took the research on lactic acid and ammonia buildup within muscles over certain rep ranges. And obviously Mike T has done a bit of work around this kind of stuff on a certain level.
So we're talking a bit of signal transduction theory, right?
Yeah. So when we think of signal transduction theory, it's a way that we can understand a little bit better what's happening to the muscles or what's happening to the body. So we say we have like a signal. That signal goes in from whatever receptor mechanism we can, and then causes a cascade and changes things along the way, and then we get an output at the end of it. Okay. We don't really know what's happening. This is kind of a fundamental thing about this whole process, is that, like, as a profession, coaches are just guessing. And this is one of the huge problems, that we don't know what's happening time to time. Like, we're in a situation where, like, I can give you a free set of free squats at 0.4 meters a second to do. And on one day that's going to have like X as a result, and on another day it's going to have Y as a result. And we just don't know what's going to be.
Right. So
our job, like, using these biological pathways as an idea of creating I try not to be too vague, but because we don't know what's going on, we can't be too precise. So we just need to create principled ways that are going to tell us what's going on. Does that make sense? So when you talk about like masking of fatigue with that, but I might have to go back on this one a little bit, by the way, mate. I'm going to put my hand up there.
So let's step back, because, I'm familiar with signal transduction theory from the peptide sense, like what's happening from, a cellular perspective, upregulating receptors. But for our audience, can you walk through, the basis of signal transduction theory?
Yeah, so signal transduction theory is just a way to describe what happens within the body when we get a signal from outside. Okay, so we can say, okay, we get a signal which is, say, tension on the muscle. Could, like, the body doesn't know we're lifting weights; it just knows there's tension. Okay, so that tension then might activate some sort of hormone production, goes to a hormone receptor, causes a reaction within a cell, and that might be the increase of muscle protein synthesis. It might be downregulation of inflammatory hormones. It could even be something like really crazy, like the idea of controlling diabetes with lifting. So we get that T-glup activation, right? So if you put tension on a cell, it causes T-glup translocation, which opens up pathways to taking glucose without necessarily part of insulin, right? Which is a complete aside, but it's a super powerful way of changing the body. So basically, you can think of signal transduction theory as a complicated way of saying you have one input, it goes through a number of steps, and that gives us a reliable output.
Yeah, and I said, you're not going to use that in, understanding, like, how am I applying a set and rep scheme, but understanding those mechanisms, I think, helps understand why we have some variability in those outcomes, because the body may be at different states, the nervous system, all these factors. But, bearing all that in mind, how would you put this into place as it relates to collecting metrics and, as far as subjective, objective, and putting some of this to use in training?
So we use signal transduction theory as a basis to understand it, like you say. So we want to know that just because I'm applying a certain stimulus doesn't mean I'm getting a certain output. In terms of collecting metrics, this is kind of where the veil is lifted as such, because even though we can't predict like outcomes, we can still deal with the data that comes out of this. Okay, so if we're looking at something like stress index, that we get a prediction of internal stress, so internal load, okay, which can be related back to the this transduction theory, because if a internal stress is too high, we get a different outcome, right? If we get to the point where we start getting down regulation of positive adaptation, okay, so we start getting into neutral, even negative adaptation, that's still a response to training stimulus. Okay, just because it's not positive doesn't mean it's not a response, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's same as if we're changing a manufacturing process and we create a bottleneck, we changed it, but it's still a negative response.
Not the response what we want, but it's still a response to what we're doing.
So we can have. So when we look at this and we say, okay, internal stress is too high, we can still take it into account. So when we're looking at, say, training volume, in which case we'll take this as a stress index score, we can have a sweet spot to hit. And we want to take that over multiple sessions. So it's okay to go, let's say we have a stress index of like 15 to 17. And that's kind of where we want to sit. Over like 3 or 4 days, you might bump up to 20, and that's just a really hard session. But then we want to see it come back down underneath it. So it's a way of modulating your training without having to rely on how many pounds you lifted.
So we're looking at all those factors via intensity, volume, everything. And as far as what kind of stress or stress index we are then applying on the system. Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off.
Yeah, so it's even more than that. So we don't want to just take in like sets, reps, load. Okay, we're looking at, so the research on this comes from accumulation of lactic acid and accumulation of ammonia. Okay, which is hard to do in a gym setting unless you have some pretty specialized kit. But you take into account effort, which is like a really cool thing, because I know, like, and I've said this a bunch of times, like if I watch you do a set of deadlifts, like your slowest deadlift that I've seen is like 0.02 meters a second, which is really slow. My slowest deadlift is about 0.3 meters a second. So you are grinding out deadlifts much more than I am. So even if we have the same relative loading, you're putting much more stress on your body because I'm just not able to grind like you are. Right. Yeah. And so that doesn't, so even though if we took volume into account, let's just say we lifted the same, okay, I would still have less stress because I'm just not trying as hard as you are. And that's not taken into account with traditional loading schemes, which is a huge error. So it's okay saying, okay, I'm going to have 3 times 3 at 0.3 meters a second, and somewhere like that should be analogous to 8 RPE, just say. But if you're not taking your RPE into account, you're just kind of prescribing it and seeing what happens, it just doesn't mean anything. So that's why the stress index is like the next level of monitoring training, because we take subjective stuff into account as well.
Yeah. And this conversation sounds very ethereal, but when we look at what's making the change is the ability to not just add the subjective nature of what we can capture now, but the easy accessibility that we're gaining for those objective metrics. Like we're talking velocity in this. We really pioneered the use of using velocity as a tap in to understand where your readiness is and actionable versus using, let's say, well, in the past, there was really, prior to the tools that have developed over the last 10 or 15 years, there really wasn't any objective ways to really understand your readiness today and what you can do. And that's really a leading indicator, right? That allows us to adjust our training right now versus like an HRV data that's not tied to a specific plan. And it's just telling you, hey, rest, or hey, push it harder, but doesn't know whether we're actually trying to accumulate said fatigue,
Yeah.
in the system. Because if we followed that, up to, I'm on a bit of a tangent, but, if we followed that, peer data that's put out in like any of the, wellness apps around HRV, and let's say I'm peaking for a marathon, if I'm sitting there managing my HRV on a daily basis and I'm doing it as best as possible, I'm going to get to that marathon and I'm going to perform very poorly compared to what I'd done if I had accumulated fatigue and had a supercompensatory effect of that. Because there's phases, like we have to tie those two together. I know I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but I think the interesting thing is like we can have these conversations because these tools are becoming readily available, and some of them may not be quite as easily as accessible as right now, but understanding the better way that we can both tie subjective measures with these objective and then better understand the stress index, right? And so I think that might be a good segue, maybe not a segue, but time to transition into the K value as it relates to, these adaptive modulators and the stress index.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to quickly touch on one other thing that does tie into the K value, because if I don't touch on this, it's going to seem kind of dichotomous. So when we think about advantages to the stress index system, it's that we don't have to rely on kind of outdated methods of just, hey, my next block of training has to be this many pounds of volume more. Okay, because there's an idea that over time your pounds per session or pounds per week or whatever kind of duration you want to do it on has to go up. Okay, and that's not untrue, but it doesn't have to be forced upwards as a result of like programming. It's similar to like, hey, have you got stronger and that makes you lift faster, or have your lifts got faster because you're stronger? Right? It's the same idea that you will see a natural progression of pounds per session going up, but that's not the goal. The goal is to maintain a level of stress that disrupts homeostasis to the extent that you get the highest rate of adaptation, or the highest rate of positive adaptation.
Yeah,
that's kind of the key. So when we talk about K values, we're really talking about it in the context of load lifted, just because that's the easiest to understand. But we could equally talk about it in the context of stress index. So we could say, let's explain what K value is first. K value is essentially the average load you lifted over a block of training to get the said result. Okay, that's good what it is. And then we say, okay, well, if this is the result we got from doing this, then we might have to add an amount to get a better result. So this is off the work of Travis Mash. So
yeah,
Travis
and we used a lot of this in my grand goals. Like when I talked about, so like we knew exactly what load that we needed to have, or I needed to have, and this was with Brandon Sen managing it. But here's the load that I had to be able to sustain in a weekly period to get this goal based on knowing what I've done prior. And so that's literally how we managed that over that period of time. And it's like, okay, deadlifts, I'm going to have to accomplish this, X amount of volume and intensity over the course of a week. So I'm going to have to add an extra day. I'm going to have to get there. And I wasn't able to do that prior. So like, how do we build into doing that? Starting with, doing it as block pulls, then building that, like getting to building up that potential so that I could handle that average load of training, and boom, like there it is. The output was now, once I was handling that average load, being able to accomplish those lifts.
What's just really cool about that and that specific example is that, and we haven't spoken about this like previously because it's just a bit too high resolution, stress index should have a range of motion component as well that we see. And intuitively, this is right. Like we should see less stress from partial movements. So this kind of current kind of trend towards lengthened partials in training kind of has a beneficiary effect that we can say, okay, well, I'm guessing maybe an equivalency of hypertrophic like gain from doing partial range of motion over full range of motion, but I'm accumulating less stress doing it, or less internal loading doing it, which is a super valuable thing. So on your school stuff, so on your community today, I mentioned like, hey, one of the benefits of single leg work. So we said about single leg RDLs and that is this a reduced axial loading. Stress index is much lower if we can reduce this central. So we split stress index up into central and peripheral. Okay, if we can take away that high axial loading, we reduce the stress in the body doing it that way. Just like a really interesting aside, that you were kind of doing this shit before, like you knew you were doing this shit.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is cool, right? Like that's
well, and we
see
see that with a lot of high level performers, where after the fact we look at it and go, oh, this made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, and that's why it works, right? It's kind of it's not a survivorship bias; it's like it's a being right bias.
Yeah. Well, and just because the axial loading was going to be so high in the squat program, that was very intentful, like earlier in the year, to do some of those heavier or mixed heavier. Like I needed to build my upper back strength, my lats and all that to be able to stabilize that. Well, I wasn't going to be able to sustain that type of loading doing heavy bent over rows when I was in this phase of doing the heavy squats. That would just be cumulative too much stress, right? So we built towards that. It was a lot of heavy transformer bar work with with a big bending moment at the T-spine. It was bent over rows, and then we would start paring that down, and people would think that during that squat phase I was doing a lot of other stuff maybe to maintain those strengths, but I had to pare those completely out so that all of my stress could be pushed into that one singular thing at that point. Yeah,
and that opens up a ton of like questions about skills versus physiological adaptation. Like, what's a skill adaptation? What's a physiological adaptation? And how do we sequence those? Which is like a super interesting topic. But really comes under a periodization heading that we probably don't have the time to get into today.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like if you are managing someone's training, you have the capability of summing all of this and seeing what their stress index is. If you've got those, indexed by that, hey, this movement is, a 0.8, this one's a 0.9, whatever, like grading mechanism that you use. And then you could see the average training load over a period of time and see, times that by 100 and divide it by, the proposed total, right?
Yeah. So this is really getting to what K value is. So I'm glad you brought this back, because I would go off and talk about programming for a long time. So K value is the average intensity as a percent times 100 over what you want to do. Okay, so you'd have, okay, well, my goal is to reach an 800-pound deadlift, right? So my deadlift was 793 is my best deadlift. Incredibly frustrating because I was very close to 800. So I could have taken the load I was doing at that time, which was actually really quite low. It was maybe 1,200 kilos a week. 1,200? Yeah, 1,200. It was really, really low, but very, very high intensity. And I could have gone, okay, well, divide times 1,200 by times 1,200. So let me get this right. Cyclist is the average intensity, which in my case was about 0.3 meters a second. I did 3 reps. I don't know if I told you this. My training when I did this, I just deadlifted for a year. That's all I did. I did 3 reps, two, three times a week, like 3 singles. Wow. I went from a 600 deadlift to a 793 deadlift.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, that's by the by. And I could have just gone, okay, well, it might be that I just need to add a rep. Maybe that just adding that extra rep would have done it, but we don't know until we work through that equation.
Yep. And it's not a complicated equation, but you've got
to
have the data.
Simple. Yeah.
You've got to have the data.
Well,
right.
This is like the next generation thing. That if we're not making educated guesses, we're making really shit guesses. But the idea that you can be 95% sure that you're getting something right, okay? And then you make the next assumption. If you're 95% sure you're making that right, great. Do that a few more times, and you're down to like a coin toss. Like 95% like right is only good like once or twice. And then your chance of every single step being right is pretty damn low.
So to me, I'm sitting here thinking, well, wouldn't that be fantastic if, people developing these programming apps were actually building this stuff into it? Because no one is doing that, because it seems like you could really input a really great, machine learning model, into, having this information to really output some really individualized training based on how someone is actually training.
Yeah, that's a funny thought there. So, yeah, basically, if you can automate this stuff, you open up a ton of ease of programming because you know what you need to do. So, are we going to talk about this, or this is where we talk about the app development stuff?
We're working on something like this, right? So,
yeah, we
but.
are.
Yeah,
Let me quickly get into this,
but that's when I say
exciting.
like the data analysis, like it's all there, and the equations are not that complicated. Modeling all this together, and there's obviously a lot more that goes into training than just the stress index here. But when you talk about it, and if you don't have the tools, like that's a lot of work to pull all that information together to manage it. But it's at the end of the day, it's all right there.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's even better than that because these work so synergistically. Like you end up getting better ideas of what's the right thing to do. Okay, like you already know how much stress you can handle in a given time frame. Okay, and that's your stress index. How well are you going to respond? Is it going to be a positive or negative adaptation depending on stress index or internal loading? You already know what the total amount of work you have to do is in a set time. That's your K value.
Yep.
And then there's only a few ways those two can combine. So you have a really good guidance on kind of what you want to do. And like that gives you a ton of predictive value that you can kind of know where you're going to be, which is unknown. Like, yeah, we can. So I'm a big fan of Anatoly Bondarchuk. Okay, and Anatoly Bondarchuk talks about natural peaking versus forced peaking. What we traditionally see in powerlifting is forced peaking, where we incur so much fatigue going into a competition that a reduction in load reveals the peak. Okay, that's that idea of I don't think supercompensation is the right word, even though that is what's happening. Like what's really happening is you're getting an increase in coordination. You're getting an increase in like beneficial hormonal status, rather than just being fucked up from doing too much volume. Okay, so we're not really getting a bounce back from doing the work. We're getting an increase in performance because we're having lack of fatigue. So that's where that crucial peak comes from. Okay, Bondarchuk proposes an idea of this development of sports form, which is where you just naturally get better and better at something until you stop disrupting homeostasis with that same result or same stimulus. And that's what we're talking about. We're saying, okay, if I predict the amount of work, predict accurately the amount of work that I've got to do and how much long it's going to take me to get somewhere, you can just naturally peak for something without having to incur over fatigue. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Right. Like you shouldn't. You should definitely train hard, and there should definitely be times where you're kind of working hard and you feel shit. But
that's
if that
essentially
comes away from comp,
it's a way that we can force it. We know that we can force it, but it may not be as beneficial as a natural.
I mean, yeah, like name like a powerlifter who hasn't got hurt from overdoing it.
Yeah, well, that's what we opened this talking about, right? Was like you are in a fatigue state and you don't know exactly where everything's at, and you're riding that edge, and that's when those injuries happen, and that's why I've developed a lot of the peptide protocols and stuff that I have to then go in and enhance in a short period of time recovery adaptations to get them back on phase.
Well, let's look at this then, Chris. If we know that a set stress index is going to cause the most optimal rate of positive adaptation, and we kind of know the amount of work we got to do to get somewhere, we can split that evenly over a block of training. Okay, we could, in some cases, if you have the right athlete with the right mental kind of predisposition, because it does matter. Like, personality matters in training. Like,
Yes.
it just is. Like, if you have someone who can do the same work for 20 weeks, the work at the start, so 20 weeks out, is going to be way harder than the work at the end of 20 weeks. You're going to have
Yes.
less
Yeah.
fatigue at the end of 20 weeks, but still have a positive adaptation because we know the stress index is going to be right. So you actually go into competition with much less fatigue than you may have, which is huge. Right? Like, that's like a way to make competitions way more fun because you don't walk in feeling like shit.
I remember some competitions early in my days where I was just absolutely wrecked. I mean, it took me months to recover from a few of those.
Yeah.
And the deadlift and squat people always ask me, how hard was that? And I'm like, that's freaking easy. Did you look at my training leading up to it? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
It's crazy.
doing 1,000 pounds for a triple was easy. Like that, that didn't wreck me at all.
Which is nuts. Yeah.
Let's talk back. We were talking RPE, subjective measures. So we got RPE, we got reps in reserve. How do you integrate that into this calculation for K value?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we take an average RPE over the block for the most part, because you should be collecting that data. Like, if you're a coach or if you're serious by your own training, you should be recording all the values that you have a use for. Okay, and if you want to look at stress loading, then RPE is a huge part of that. So I would just take it over the block for that one, because we're getting a lot of the other values just from the stress index. So, like, we can include autoregulation within that. You can kind of look at subjective feedback levels that would introduce a daily kind of like wavering. But I just don't. It's not as important, I don't think. Like, yeah, you can update daily maxes based upon that, which is kind of cool, right? Because you can say, hey, I need, if you're going to use a percentage system, 98% over X amount of time, times 100, that's your K value. Or you can say, I'm going to take it at a set speed or a set RPE, because it's all the same at the end of the day. Like, it doesn't, like,
Yep.
actual weight, I know this is controversial, the actual weight on the bar is not important. It is the stimulus you're getting from doing the work, which is important. The end result is the big deal. Okay, so if we're talking about, like, going back to your training back in the day where you were really beat up, you were not lifting near your potential, but then you were going to set a world record, which is, quite good.
Yep.
So the actual load on the bar wasn't a big deal.
Yes. Yeah. I just want to go back to, my first principles here for a minute. If we think about this, using the K value, what is that going to do? Like, that is going to allow us to really tailor something that is individually responsive to both the training environment and that person's individual physiological responses to training, as well as all the other stresses that they may be having in their life, right? We are going to be able to create a very precise adaptive training, individualized for the person. At the same time, we talked about lifters getting injuries while they're developing into these, peaking routines, the force peaking, but monitoring the stress individually allows us to avoid that overtraining. We're not pushing into at any point an area where we're going to create these chronic overuse conditions. I mean, there's always still some level of, things like that happen in life, but we can substantially mitigate that from a training perspective, because, like, how many people are pulling out of, a competitive event because they pushed it too hard, in the times leading up to that, or, getting back into training, starting training. You want to get into training. This is a period that's really hard to actually know where someone is at with their physiological preparedness, if they've either taken time off from lifting or they're getting into lifting in that period where they're adapting to that training response. And those, again, are proven to be the most opportunity time for get an injury. Whenever we've had a reduction in our average or chronic load over a period of time, as we come out of that, we're not able to sustain, we ramp it up. Even getting back to normal can be too much of a ramp, or someone's trying to make up for lost time. I speak to that a lot. So it's really the best way to optimize your training. I mean, hands down, using this is going to help you, achieve your peak level of fitness and your peak level of readiness if you're able to, incorporate this into your training. I mean,
Yeah,
is that a
absolutely.
fairly accurate summary of?
Yeah, I think you actually, going back to first principles, I think you hit on something that we kind of missed and kind of glanced over, which is if you're using K value as a progression system, then you're already including overload within it. Because that overload, like you have to do more to reach that higher number, right?
Yep.
And it might not be more weight, it might be more density. Like you might be doing something different. You might get a better result from doing the same work in less time.
Yep.
Right. So we can play around with any of these stimulus things. So like first principles, are you creating dynamic overload, which is just a way of saying, are you creating a positive stress response?
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's no reason not to use it. Like the math isn't hard, your phone can do it. I mean, it would be a lot of work. You're much better off getting an app to do it, but you could make a spreadsheet. It'd just be a lot of work.
It would be a lot of work. Now, we have done that, and that's actually, how we manage athletes. But there's still a lot of like manual input of some of these, objective measures that you've got to capture, make sure that they're captured, input. It is a lot of work. But at the end of the day, it's actually I wouldn't say fairly simple. The algorithms are fairly complex, but the math is fairly simple.
Yeah, like it's not even the inputting, which is the issue. Is that, and this isn't like a dig at anyone, it's that people are unreliable. Like some days, like we touched before, your 9 out of 10 and my 9 out of 10 are very, very different. So we'll be like trying to put stuff into spreadsheets.
Sen used to joke. His joke was I would do like a 5-rep max and, barely finish the last one, be bleeding
7.
out my nose and staggering. And he'd be like, what's your RPE? And I'd be 7.
yeah.
I got 3 reps. I got 3 reps left in the tank, baby.
yeah. Kitty's exactly the same. Which is why you guys are great lifters, right? But like, then if I'm relying on an athlete to input that into a spreadsheet, it kind of messes it up. Whereas if you're on an app, like I know for a fact the app actually will measure the difference over time. So we take the Z score rather than a baseline score, which is way more important. Because then you're looking at, like, is it different from the scores around it rather than is it just a high or low score? Yeah. Right.
Well,
that's something coaches do intuitively. So I'll explain quickly. So when I'm looking at a training program, so I'm looking at a training log, and my athletes come back with like an effort level of like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, and I'm seeing it, and I'm watching the videos, and they're lifting it at 0.5 meters a second, which is quick. Like I know that they're wrong, basically. But it's hard for me to do anything about it because when I'm looking at the algorithm in the spreadsheet, like it's pumping out, hey, don't go heavier. Like this is a very hard workout. And when it's in the app goes, okay, well, the app isn't confined by emotions or having to pay attention to that stuff. All the app cares about, and this is a positive, by the way. It sounds like it's going to be negative, definitely positive. All the app cares about is, hey, does the feedback from the athlete raise a concern? Is it a concerning change? Is it so Z scores like the change in standard deviation? Okay, so is it making a big enough difference for us to have to revisit it and look at it? Right. So if we look at feedback over time, and you're saying, hey, this is a 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10, no matter what. But one day you're like, oh, this is a 9. Like that's a worry. Okay, right. Even though everything else is a 9, your feedback on it is actually like concerning because it's such a big difference. So it's that difference between numbers which is important, not the actual number.
Right. Yeah, that perception. Now, I think you mentioned something about this is, I think it was, this is what makes great coaches. Maybe that wasn't exactly the line, but this is, people get, there's like an anti-data movement, a bit, and going, well, what about the art of coaching? And that really is like, I think the art of coaching is that eye to be able to pick up and capture these things that we're not currently doing with data. And also just the fact that there's so much systems out there that collect data for data collections purposes, but they're not providing you action-based data. And that's what here's a subset that helps us answer a question of which direction we're going. Like those are the choices that we need to make instead of just compiling data into a spreadsheet so we can try to analyze and reflect backwardly what worked well so we can plan, the future. It is really, it's just like filing reports in the old days and closing up a drawer. And, they're in that drawer, we've got the data, but what actually happened, versus a problem coming to someone's desk going, here's a problem. Hey, let's take action. Let's go fix it.
Well, that's one step behind. I mean, because what you're talking about is basically levels to data analysis. One is like looking at the data, which is rubbish. Like data collection for data collection's sake is like mental masturbation. Yeah.
All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com, that's NABOSO.com, and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off. I did SPC in the manufacturing world for a long time, and that was like 70s, 80s, and it's just like I'd go in and people be collecting these. Look, we do SPC, we chart it all, we put it in. I'm like, where's it go? It goes to my manager, it goes in a file cabinet. I'm like, stop. Yeah. But we do SPC, it's the right way to do it. Haven't you heard of dimming? And I'm like, what action are you taking? If the dot goes here, or these series of dots go here, then we do this X things, put those X things on the chart, take action, call maintenance, do whatever it is. Like that's a value, but filing it and just collecting data is just, it's a waste of everyone's time. Like it's an administrative, it just doesn't do it. Like you need to go, what decision and what action are we driving? Let's get the data to make those decisions, right? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And like coaching has so much to learn from manufacturing, because the reality is that there's much more money in manufacturing than coaching. So they've developed good systems. So we look at data analysis, collecting data, but I say collecting data, rubbish. The next step is kind of what you're talking about, which is collecting data and looking back on it and like kind of seeing, oh, this happened because of this. Okay. The next step is collecting data and using that to predict stuff. So and that's really where we want to be. We want to be collecting data to say we think this is going to happen.
Yeah,
and that's
based
where the
on this,
and
that's the predictive. Like we see, and that's where I was going. That's where I worked with some PhDs in SPC, where it's like we see this data. Something's not bad yet, but that's predictive of this going out. Like we've got to check and see if the spindle bearing's getting a little loose. We've got to do here's these things so that we can mitigate having downtime or having something go out of spec, instead of being able to say, well, we're 95% within spec. Like how do we tighten that up and be predictive about issues? And the same thing, potential failure, potential injury, like all this data is available in what's happening. And the same thing is, fine-tuning a manufacturing process is the same thing as fine-tuning a human, humans for performance. Yeah, and absolutely. That is where the coach's eye comes in. And that is the ability for a high-level coach to be able to see what's going on in an athlete by watching their movement, whether they know it or not, and making the decisions about how to modulate their training appropriately. And we can take that, which is not scalable, and create it in a scalable fashion through using the right algorithms and the right data collection and building that.
Well, this is a cool segue. You like this? So this is where we talk about jerk metrics, right?
I've been looking forward to talking about jerk, man. The whole thing. We'll skip the long-term athletic development for another discussion. I've been looking forward to this whole thing about talking about jerk metrics.
And this is what you're talking about, because you're saying, hey, our bearings are going, so we're getting vibration on a system because our bearings are folding up, and that's what jerk metric is. So jerk metric is the amount of change in acceleration. Okay, so it's like so speed is meters per second, right? Acceleration is meters per second. Jerk metric is meters per second. Okay, and what you're seeing in this kind of example where our bearings are going on a machine, and it's going to be a prediction of basically disaster, because if the bearings go, you're in shit creek, right? If we're looking at measuring a barbell's movement, and we start seeing big changes in acceleration, change in acceleration.
So you may not see a change it still may be 0.3 meters per second and 0.3 meters per second, but we're talking about within that movement, the rate of change of acceleration changes. That tells us something very fundamentally about what's happening. Yeah.
So, and this is something which robots and an app with camera technology will do better than people. Okay, I can look at a squat and I can go, you look tired even though you're not tired, but I can't reliably do it. Coaches will say they can, because humans are pretty good, but not as well as the machine to define it. Okay, so what we're looking for is... Sorry, Cameron?
Oh, I was... go ahead. I'm just wanting to interrupt, that's all.
Did you interrupt? Why? Interrupt.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is going back to signal transduction theory, as well as, let's say, some talking about neurocentric approach as well, right? Our modern day understanding of what is a trigger point, right? It's not really a trigger point, but what happens is we've got some overuse or potential damage of a particular area, and we've got release of some chemicals in that related area, which then restricts the muscle around that nerve tunnel, and that creates basically what we know as a trigger point. But it's not really an adhesion. It's not this type thing. But we've got that, and that's what then starts creating maybe movement restrictions, so on. Really overview look at this, right? But then we have, how does that relate to injury, right? So that is. This is talking to Dr. Charlie Weingroff, right? Talking about hypoxic conditions in muscle. And, if we don't clear those in time enough, that's essentially the same process happening, right? And we've got that acid buildup, and that is basically the highest potentiation of injury. Well, let's take that a step further. What creates hypoxic, right? It's an overuse of muscles. Well, it's typically not somebody going into a rhabdo type situation, but it's a breakdown of some small minutia of firing and an overuse of particular muscles as it relates to that. So if we take that a step further, when do we see that? We would see that with a jerk velocity. We would see that in that state. So we have an early intervention before we start, as we have a muscle start fatiguing out and not working, then we get the compensation of other muscles kicking in an overuse standpoint, to the point that it impacts the rate of acceleration, which then creates chemical release in the body that affects the receptors, which causes things to happen through, our sensor signaling. All this leads up into potentiation of injury issues, as well as, maybe some issues relating to the nerve tunnel, which then restricts mobility, which then you've got to do some recovery work later. All of it rolls back into this thing called the jerk metric, and our ability to see how smooth the movement is, right?
Yeah, that's you nailed it. And this is why we need to understand the signal transduction theory. So we understand that when blood pH is or muscle pH is lowered, we get decreases in enzymatic activity. We get calcium binding. We get like changes in electrical properties of muscles. Like that's why we have to understand the fundamentals. I want to say fundamentals. I'm talking like like the fundamental particles. Like that's why we need the smallest building blocks to understand like the bigger picture. Like it just makes sense. Think about it. It just makes sense. Yeah,
It does make sense. It does make a lot of sense.
If I just keep saying it, it's gonna, So when we're taking, let's say we take a camera, we record a movement. Like we want to be able to say, okay, we have a jerk matrix, which is that change rate of acceleration over a set amount. If the goal of the session is rehab, okay, so I had an international level athlete, great guy, not powerlifting. He was a overhead sport athlete, and he got stuck here. He couldn't get his arm above this position, which as an overhead sport athlete is a really big deal. Just getting him to slow down and try and go for this position to allow like no fatigue to set in allowed him to get his arms overhead in 2 or 3 weeks. It was super quick for someone who had a bad shoulder for years. And it's just like understanding like certain qualities predict change. Like understanding that if we can create smoother movements, we're going to get better movement later on. It's that old saying like slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Now I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but in this situation, like it holds true. If we can create a movement which is like constant acceleration under no fatigue, we're in a good place.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and the fact that no one is really utilizing that right now is really interesting. Now, as you and I know, we've been able to test and view that data because other people in the velocity arena are not necessarily have that output or understanding of what's going on and the ability to use that data. Yeah.
Well, it's contextualizing it as well, right? Yeah. Like you said, like it is using the data in the right context. Like just knowing it isn't enough. We have to be able to apply it.
Yeah. Now, I have to say, like, me referencing Charlie Weingroff's opinion on, increase in lactic acid being a key driver and, that correlation between the jerk metric, that's theory, but it seems pretty fundamentally straightforward given we know those mechanisms. And we also know now more of the research of understanding of what happens to the nerve and how the nerves create that, those enzyme releases, the calcium binding, these electrical properties that go on and change that tissue around it and change the tissue quality. And that's a word I use quite a bit for anyone that follows like my podcast series or some of my deeper stuff. Like tissue quality is absolutely fundamental, like with being able to manage training. That's one reason I always got this VasoBlitz sitting right back in here. It's the VasoBlitz pump time. But, the better we can keep the cellular hydration, the turnover of these, of these components through our tissue, the better, we're going to be. Like, right, that's why we start seeing issues like this, injuries develop when you're dehydrated and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, we even missed out. There's tons of stuff we're like glossing over, which we should touch on. Like,
do it. I just got so excited. I just ran.
No,
so
it's the same thing. So you're talking about tissue quality, like, and that amplification principle, like, great. I really like that amplification protocol. But we missed out on the idea
that's of course for another podcast.
Yeah. We're missing out on the idea that injury causes a decrease in blood flow, right? So if you've got like thermometers, you get like a targeted thermometer. You use them on building sites to find cables. If you get a really sensitive one and you shine one at a good joint and a bad joint, you'll see the temperature of the injured joint is lower. Okay, so it could be a decrease in vascular proliferation around a joint. Okay, decrease in vascular proliferation causes a decrease in oxygen delivery. Okay, so we then have this knock-on effect that we're going to have an increase in metabolic byproducts that are associated with deoxygenation. Okay, deoxygenation, increase in lactic acid, increase in those byproducts that come from anaerobic respiration, and then we get again a decrease in stability or smoothness, or an increase in jerk metrics, depending how you want to define that. And then we lead into higher likelihood of re-injury. So we have this kind of this like downward spiral of injury risk from getting injured the first time. We know the biggest predictor of future injury is previous injury, which is really shit. But like that's it's what it is. Like if you hurt your knee once, you're probably going to hurt it again unless you can address it. Unless you can like say, okay, this is the information I have. I know if I do over X amount of volume, or if I know if my speed decreases under 0.4 meters a second. I had a great athlete, a super strong guy, like 800-pound squat kind of strong guy. Every time his squat went under 0.4 meters a second, within 2 weeks he'd get injured. Like clockwork. It was amazing. Amazing is not the right word, but and we could measure it. Yeah, like I have a wonderful graphic which like just says, "Hey, this is when we realized." And then you just see a squat like shoot back upwards because we just never went under that threshold again. Okay, like super interesting. So if you know the measurements you're taking, and you know how to apply them, or you have a system or an algorithm which does it for you, then you don't have to worry about that shit, like because it's taken account of.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on jerk metric or adaptive modulation stress index we want to leave this with?
Yeah, actually on jerk metric, don't think of it just as a weightlifting thing. If you're doing cardio as well, pretty important, especially for running, because changing acceleration of kind of the phases of running is a big deal. No, that's probably it. I think it's probably the future. I think if people aren't starting to take into account internal loading in some form, they're probably not going to be getting the best out of their athletes right themselves.
All right. Yep.
Yep.
I think that's a good place to leave it for today, and I hope we haven't bored everybody too much. But I think that those that want to join us for this continuing conversation will have an understanding of what I believe is the next generation of training principles. And so really excited that anybody that wants to check out further information as far as movement quality videos, articles by Alex, myself, I recently just dropped my 300-page deadlift manual, 1,000-pound deadlift. Got just a massive amount of stuff on the community. You can check that out at chrisduffin.com. And it'll give you, that's absolutely free for anyone to come and join and check out a base level of, videos and articles and community, all for free with like-minded folks, really incredible contributors as well, with Alex as well as Anthony, who is doing the peptide series, peptide and supplementation and off-use medication series. So some really deep dives on stuff. So I know it's not for everyone, but let's keep learning. Let's keep growing together. Thank you all.